Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Into the Necrosphere. This week, I am joined by the great Chris Cannella, formerly of Autumn's End, now with Deicide. He has also been, for the past several years, a very prolific name in the guitar industry. So we spoke about how he ended up joining Deicide. We spoke about his love for guitar and how he got into the music business. And I also managed to get a couple of Eddie Van Halen stories out of him, as well as an update on the state of play vis-a-vis the forthcoming Deicide record. So a really fun conversation. Chris is an awesome guy, and I'm sure you are going to enjoy this chat. If you stick around afterwards, you'll also get to hear me share my thoughts on the new record by Australia's Pestilential Shadows. The record is called Revenant. I think absolutely fantastic, and really something that folks need to sit up and pay attention to. And then straight after that, I will do my usual news rant and trash talking. This week, I want to talk about all of the albums that I'm looking forward to most for the remainder of 2021. And not music related, but I did see the movie over the weekend, and I thought I'd share some thoughts and some views on it, but the new Candyman. So if you want to know what I thought of the movie, stick around to the very end of the podcast, and you'll find out. As ever, if you're new to the show and you are not yet a subscriber, then I want you to give that subscribe button a flying elbow off the top rope on whatever platform that you consume your podcasts on. And then immediately thereafter, take your families and your close friends' mobile devices and do exactly the same for them. Because so likely are they to be thrilled by what you've done and thrilled by the prospect of receiving a brand new episode of Into the Necrosphere delivered to them every Tuesday for free, that they will soon join you in following the podcast on social media, be it Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And on Christmas Day, don't be surprised if under your tree and in your stocking you receive an Into the Necrosphere hoodie or t-shirt, which they lovingly purchased for you off the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store. With that out of the way, let's get episode 98 up and running. The countdown to number 100 continues. And I welcome to the podcast for the first time ever, Chris Cannella of Deicide. When we first spoke, I know you were getting ready to do a demo session and a Q&A for Dean Guitars.
Yep.
How did that go? What was the turnout like?
It was really good. It was basically like at a place in Missouri. It was a small little thing where they put together like a big gathering of the area for people to come down and, buy and sell gear of their own and put up like almost like a swap meet type thing. But I've done clinics all over the world and all different styles. So it ended up being really fun, even for being as rural and as small town as it was. It ended up being really fun because even though a lot of people in the smaller towns don't engage verbally with you when you're talking to the audience, afterwards, if they see you around, they'll talk to you for the next 6 hours. They don't like to talk in public. So ended up working out pretty good though. So it was fun. It was just exhausting because I got home and then I was back in the office the next day and, rehearsing and everything else nonstop. Yeah. And I'm leaving for a festival tomorrow.
Oh shit. Okay. What festival are you going to play?
No, we're not actually playing. I'm going out there for work for Dean Guitars. It's a thing called Rebel Rock out in Orlando, Florida. So it's a big festival, lots and lots of bands. It's a 4-day thing. I'm only going to go out for 2 days, really, because after that, I've just cooked. Cooked. This whole week has been crazy down here. But
and you've made the trek down to Florida yourself from Arizona, if rumors are to be believed.
Yes.
So what kind of prompted that first and foremost, and then how have you found the change moving to Freedom Town?
Yeah, well, Arizona was as similar in many ways to Florida, except that Arizona is completely landlocked. You're either in a desert or you're in a forest for many, many, many hours. But the whole change really came about 4 years ago when I started working for Dean Guitars. I was commuting back and forth. I would fly out to Florida for about a week or two and then fly back home to Arizona. And then once my stepdaughter, my oldest, graduated from high school, me and the wife said, all right, well, nothing's holding us back here in Arizona anymore. Let's make the trek. because for about, the last 2.5 years or so, be playing in the band Deicide, they're out of Florida too. So, Florida death metal. It's where, American death metal is pretty well spawned. So the idea of finally, for the first time in at least, 8 to 10 years, to have my family, band, and job all in the same place, to me, it was astonishing. It was a no-brainer. So June of last year, we packed it up, flew the wife and 2 kids out. Me and my buddy Rude T, packed up the giant U-Haul and put my pickup truck on the back of the trailer. I drove a car with the dogs, and we just headed across the country, 2,600 miles. And I couldn't ask for a better move. It's been really awesome here. The weather's great. There's so much to do. I like being by the water. I like being close to water. Ever since I was a kid, I like to be by lakes. I like to be by anything that because it relaxes me. So being that close to water has been amazing, and getting to rehearse all the time with the guys. This is, when I was rehearsing before, we're like 1 to 2 days a month. Now we're 2 days a week, in some instance, so it's been amazing. And it really helped out with the chemistry of the band too.
And I have a couple of folks in my day job who work for me, who live in Florida. And the one thing that I definitely get a sense of when it comes to them, and initially I thought it was the heat, and then you kind of follow what Florida's policies have been like around lockdowns and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They're definitely a lot more relaxed, a lot friendlier, and you just kind of get the sense they enjoy life a little bit more.
Yeah. It's definitely less stressful. Arizona, when the first lockdown happened, it got pretty scary, but it eased up pretty quick. But when we moved out to Florida, there was so much less stress. There was nobody was getting mean about anything. Nobody's, getting in your grill if you think different from them. It was pretty relaxed, and going out in public, nobody was really scared. I mean, people are getting sick. But and I'm not going to go in any kind of political thing for any, go down. But the thing was it was kind of the mentality: if you get sick, you get sick. Yeah. And chances are, the mindset was chances are you're gonna survive. Yeah. So let's, don't stress out. Please, let's go out in public, go see what you're supposed to see. Go to the water. Go to the Gulf, go to do what you got to do, and yes, there was some shut down things and minimal capacities, but it quickly opened up, and it never really felt like you were, smut, like locked down, imprisoned or anything. It never felt that way out here.
Yeah. The impression I took away from looking at what they were doing was the idea was very much safeguard the elderly. Mm-hmm. the rest of folks kind of get given at least a degree of free agency to decide how they're going to manage this. I know DeSantis didn't push for mask mandates or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And that's the way to go. I mean, the disease and the disruption caused by it is fucking bad enough. And, speaking as somebody who had it myself, it fucking sucks to have it. But at the same time, what sucks way worse is having your life disrupted for years and years on end, which, seems like, I think about folks in Australia as an example. I know a lot of people listen to the show who are in Australia. What's happening there to me is borderline criminal.
My mind is blown when I see what's happening over there, over such a minimal amount of cases and such, physical brutality that's going on. It just makes no sense to me. By some of the most kind and funniest people I've ever met have been from Australia, and to see such social disarray, it's insanity. And, for the last few years here in the States, and what you've been through over in the UK and then in Europe, with terrorism and things that have happened and social unrest for the last few years, it's all right, everybody, stop. Mm-hmm. Stop. It's out of control. And it's if one thing, when the social unrest stops from, the terrorist things that were happening over in France and everything that was happening over here in Orlando, then all of a sudden the disease comes, and then the disease comes, and they're starting over again, in Australia. It's just out of control. And I feel bad for them.
Me too. Sidebar, Australia also has one of the most killer metal scenes on the face of the earth. The underground death and black metal scene over there, I don't know how familiar you are with some of the bands there, but it's fucking nuts.
I'm not as familiar, and I would love to know more because I've never been to Australia.
I'll send you a few bands.
Please do. I'd love to hear it.
No, I will. As I said, I'm friends with quite a few folks there anyway. But they just seem to be going from strength to strength. And it's a little bit like, if you listen to AC/DC, right, in the time that they came out, they were a band who had vestiges of some of what was going on at the time in their sound. But they were that a little bit off the axis, and that's what made them sound so unique and so cool, right?
Right.
And that's kind of what's happened with the extreme metal scene in Australia as well. You'll have a death metal band they're very distinctly death metal. For a fact those guys listen to Deicide, they listen to Morbid Angel, they listen to Entombed. They grew up on the founding fathers, but the way they've interpreted that somehow when the influence travels over to Australia, it just goes through sort of this Antipodean filter, and all of the bands there just sound that a little bit off axis, but in the best possible way, and it makes them sound so distinct and so enjoyable. So I'll for sure send you some stuff.
Oh, I'd love to hear it. Maybe it's because the toilets go backwards. I don't know. It's something's setting it off, so that's awesome.
I've often tried to theorize what it is because I come from South Africa, and in all due fairness, and no offense to my South African brethren, the South African scene for the most part is crap. But as I said, somehow in Australia it's top notch. But that's kind of a side note. We spoke about the guitar clinic. I was curious in the lockdown, with people sitting at home with nothing to do. Did you, at Dean, did you guys find that, more people were picking up the guitar or more folks were kind of turning to something like an instrument as a hobby for the first time?
Massive growth. And it went across the industry. So I'm not going to say it's just us. We've had a tremendous amount of growth during the pandemic. People are definitely starting to pick up guitars more. People are picking up a lot of ukuleles, a lot of acoustic guitars. Girls are starting to play a lot more music. But one thing that we also found was on our higher end stuff, on the Dean high end, like the USAs and the Select Series stuff, the demand went through the roof, and we couldn't figure out why, because nobody's playing out. They're professional grade instruments, if not for collectors. But we found that when people were getting that stimulus money, it was more apt to go towards guitars than it was towards, rent. It
either went to Bitcoin or it went to expensive shit. Yeah,
exactly.
That's very cool though. But what kind of originally got you into the guitar racket? Because you've been doing this for eons, right? You worked for, if I'm correct, Fender. You worked for Jackson as well, right?
Yeah. So in fact, I worked for Jackson and EVH under the Fender umbrella. So under FMIC, which owns Jackson and distributes and markets EVH for Eddie Van Halen. So been involved with the Jackson guys since the 90s as friends. So then with, a long time ago when Fender, because Fender was actually out of Scottsdale, Arizona, the headquarters for a very long time. So when shortly after they acquired Jackson Guitars, a very good friend of mine hit me up named Brian McDonald and said, would you like to, come on board, and start doing this? Because at the time, I was still, I was touring with my old band N17. We were on Mercury Records and all this stuff. Things were going pretty hot, but it started to, at this time, started slowing down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just started working on some new music with my old first version of what later became Autumn's End. And Brian was like, are you done touring for a while? I was like, yeah, I didn't think I was going to continue on too much. And he's like, come on down. We'd love to have you. And then I got into the guitar side of manufacturing, and it took me a while to learn it. But I ended up traveling across the world to learn it, met with many, many factories. And during that time, I became the conduit between Eddie Van Halen and Fender for many years. And he was the absolute just sweetest person on the planet. And you couldn't ask for more better training than the greatest guy to ever do it, and so he was wonderful. So I learned from that, and I went to ESP and then been a Dean for the last 4 years.
Yeah. I'll tell you as another sidebar, if fate were to conspire and we were to ever hang out and have a few beers and find ourselves in a karaoke bar, if they've got Running with the Devil or Ain't Talking About Love on the on the playlist, I will for sure be singing that. If I get drunk enough, those are my two go-to songs. But
excellent.
Tell me a bit about working with Eddie Van Halen, because obviously he's such a legend, and with folks that are kind of at his level, there's always a degree of naysayers and boos from the gallery, but I mean, that's irrelevant. The influence that that man has had on, every, probably every style of music, but certainly on ours especially, is fucking insane. And on guitar playing generally. I mean, it must have been an incredible experience getting to kind of see firsthand how, his thought process, how he kind of approaches things when it comes to music in particular.
Yeah. It was amazing. He was a super, had the heart the size of Canada, just an enormous amount of love the guy carried around with him. I never had a single crossword with the man in all the years that we worked together. He's extremely smart. And yes, he was a little quirky. He, English was his third language. So he originally spoke Dutch and Indonesian before he even spoke English. And
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So when they moved to the States from Holland, he had to learn English pretty tough. And his dad also, from what Eddie used to tell me, he said, get rid of your accent, speak like an American. Don't, act or assimilate. So but he was also, very intelligent, not only because of the languages and everything that he's learned, but, some people were just, like I said, I'm not very eloquent, but, some people were just born with this extra knowledge, back then, if it was today's date, they might have called him autistic. Who knows, because a good example of an eccentric brain, like the only time you'd ever see him get mad at somebody is if you told him, no, it can't be done. That just infuriated the man. So a good example when I was working with him of how great of an ear the guy had. They were in the sessions of Different Kind of Truth when they were recording it, and I happened to be there. We were working on some projects, or I wasn't there yet. I was back in Arizona, and he called and said, listen, I'm having a problem with my personal amps. They sound really weird. So I got Mike Ulrich, the actual amp guy. Said, Eddie's having a problem with the amps. He's like, the ones that we just sent him? I said, yeah. He's like, those were perfect. So I asked Ed, I said, what is the, or Eddie, and I was like, what is the problem? And he was like, tried to explain it to me. They just didn't sound good. So we flew out the next day to Burbank, went into the control room where he had the amp, and Mike was looking at it, and he's like, man, this amp is perfect. So we took it out of the control room. We brought it out to the live room where the guitar cabinets were, and plugged it back in. And Mike was looking at it, just staring at it. And, Eddie walked back in, and he was like, that's it. It sounds perfect. It's perfect. Like, oh no. He just lost it, man. He's done. This is it. This is the story that you've all been waiting for. This is the day when he lost his mind. Okay, so we put it back together, brought it back in the control room, and it's like, what did you do? It sounds like shit again. And we're like, oh boy. Brought it back into the live room where the cabinets were, because it was just a lot of space. We opened it back up again, and Mike was like, wait a second. 2, 3. Hold on one second. He goes, grabs his meter and checks the outlets. And sure as shit, the outlet in the control room was 2 volts less than the outlet in the live room with the cabinet. And Eddie can hear it. And it drove him nuts. 2 volts.
That's fucking insane.
We called an electrician out. The guy came out, did some wiring work, whatever they do of smart electrician guy stuff, and it's back to normal. And it was just one of those things. And there was so many things like that he did that had these quirky things that only he can do. That was just, it's brilliant. It's just true brilliance. And it was astonishing. I can go on for days about it, but I will say I've never learned that much from anybody when it regards to sound, amplifiers, just and how to get things to do what you want them to. So like even with the band, like I tend to be the guy that's, asked about, hey man, how do I get my amp to do this? And I'm like, oh, let's try this, or go over to Kevin's processor. Like, what we should try to do? We should try to do this over here and tweak up, this tone and pull back this and, take some of this out or add some of this. It just tends to be that, it's a fun interactive thing, but our sound guys, sure seem to like it. So
I can imagine, but it's, people that get to that level, it's like these, wine connoisseurs that literally will be able to tell you to a 0.1%, degree of failure, the wind blew, at an average of 23 knots, and the temperature was 42 degrees centigrade for such and such a period of time. That's why the grape tastes like it does, and that's why the wine tastes like it does. I've always admired that because I don't have that. I mean, I'm in my personal life very into high-end audio from a hi-fi perspective. So I've got a very, very good setup here, and I've learned a lot about what to listen for, and kind of how I think one of the things that I've noticed that's happened to me as I've kind of stepped up in system quality is how my brain starts to distinguish between instruments, and actually how important I've begun to find listening to music on a system where there's air and space between the instruments. And I often talk about it, when I'm reviewing something, and I sometimes also think I sound like a fucking asshole to anybody that, is used to listening to, 192 kilobyte compressed nonsense on Spotify. But I listened out for those things, but then, I'll meet people that have been in the game for a lot longer, and the stuff they'll pick up when they're listening, is befuddling to me. I'm like, I don't know how they develop it.
I don't know either, and I'm proud of everything that I've been able to pick up and learn from. But there's people that I will always learn from. You know what I mean? Like guys like Mike Ulrich, the amp guy, and Howard that were over at EVH, and they were just brilliant. And I'm just like, oh my gosh! And over here at Dean, talking to Dan Russell about guitar building, and then going over to Pat Baker over in USA Assembly. These guys are just blowing my mind with this level of knowledge. And they like Pat's like talking about pedals, and we talk about amps all the time. And I'm like, did you get cut from the same cloth as Eddie? I mean, they're just so smart about how like sound works in like a tube amp. And it's beyond me. I've learned a lot in my life, and I'm enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be awesome. So, and Pat is awesome. So I learned so much from these guys, and I just I get more excited about that than giving clinics and playing guitar things. It's like, oh man, I want to learn more. So it's wonderful.
No, it's as I said, it absolutely blows my mind. But you mentioned you've kind of been involved in music equipment construction and guitar construction and stuff like that. I was curious to know, and again, this is fulfilling my own personal nerdery. When it comes to things like voicing an amplifier, or kind of building, tuning an amplifier, without necessarily kind of giving me a Bill Nye the Science Guy breakdown, what's kind of the process that you would go through at a high level to kind of get there? How long would it take, as an example, to voice an amplifier once you get to that stage in the process?
It could be anywhere from literally minutes to days. Just depending on if the first pass doesn't work and you're like, oh, that's way off. Okay, so now let's try different capacitors. Let's try this differently. And we're going to try to tune it at what chord. So it sounds funny, but amps are kind of tuned to a chord where, like a Mesa Boogie, they tend to be tuned to an E chord, whereas like an EVH is tuned to a D chord. And like Marshalls were like an A chord, things like that. So everything, that's why it has their own sounds. Also, there's, the different tubes and stuff, but when you're voicing it, when you're setting gain structures, sometimes it's really easy, and other times it takes forever if you can't seem to get it, and you're experimenting with different parts and different transformers and stuff like that, because everything changes the sound. Even if you think you got the core right, sometimes what your end goal may not match what you were originally going for with that sound. So like when Pat over here is, when his off time, he messes with Marshalls a lot. And he has shown me, like, he's taken a Plexi, which is definitely not a high gain amp, and without a pedal or anything, showed me how to cascade it and how he turned it into a high gain amp with like 4 or 5 little diodes and things. And I'm just like, what? And he was able to voice them quick. I myself would take a lot longer, and I always need help with it. Yeah.
Where did your kind of love and your passion for guitar originally come from? Because I mean, just talking to you, it comes out so vividly, and I've seen, but just looking at video of you on stage as an example. I mean, there are people that look like they are suffering for their art on stage,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just people that look like they're experiencing intense joy. And I would say you were for sure in the latter camp, which is a great thing. But where did that love come from?
It's a cliched story, just like most other kids, that play guitar. Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen. I heard that stuff when I was a kid, and I wanted to be a part of that. Not just the sound or the shred of it all, even though, yes, I started following shred guitar very early on. But then when I started hearing these songs and when I started going to concerts, I was like, I want to be a part of this group. I want to be a part of this world of people that were just doing their own thing and making music. And at that time, when I heard this stuff, it was, 81, 79, I was really, really young. It was, I always was gravitated towards the darker side of things, even with the Van Halen stuff. Like, Fair Warning is still my favorite record by far because it was the Street album. Sabbath, obviously self-explanatory. Purple Priest, I always like the darker side of Priest. And I always wanted to be a part of that group of people that, I guess you would say that, family of musicians, and so I saw those guys, and then I started seeing other bands. And then like when the 80s really kicked in, and after I was getting really into playing guitar and technical side of playing guitar, that's when I saw stuff like Exodus and Slayer and Venom and Celtic Frost. And I'm like, how do I get to be a part of that? That's for ugly people like me, and I can fit into there. I'll never be in the pretty boy club. So let's go hang out there where like the fans are true. And it's not just about trying to impress girls to get them backstage. It's about like trying to incite something emotional to that crowd. And I was obsessed with it. And it took me a long time. And I've had a couple of peaks and a lot of valleys in the journey of trying to get there. And right now I think I'm at a really nice peak, especially with Deicide and the brotherhood that we have and the music that we're writing. And there's been a lot of valleys. There was a bad years of Autumn's End. There was good years of Autumn's End. N17 had some great times, and there's a lot of stuff in the middle, and a lot of stuff in the middle. Like when tours weren't happening and the labels are falling apart, and you're broke, and you're going back to being a bill collector, and you're not sure if this is going to work out anymore, and you're moving back in with your mom. Everybody's got the horror stories, but when you're in it and you finally get a taste of it, and you know that you can make a living at it, you never want to leave.
Yeah.
That's where you're supposed to be.
Was there ever a point during, the valleys of N17 or Autumn's End where you thought, okay, look, I'm not sure I can do this anymore?
Of course. Of course. There was always times where you doubt yourself. And there was a point, from 2013 to 2016, I didn't even really play guitar. I was working at ESP, and I was commuting so much, I just didn't care. And then my old buddy, Jason Kowalski, hit me up and said, dude, you need to be playing again. My wife was getting irritated with me because I wasn't playing anymore. She said, I lost something, something about my personality or whatever. In all honesty, I was being a shit stick and kind of an asshole. And she was, forced me, but not forced me, but like encouraged me to get back into it. Jason Kowalski got me back into it. And then from there, that last version of Autumn's End was a really cool thing. But it also, I started working at Dean right after that was taken off. And that's when I met up with the guys in Deicide. Next thing I know, that is taken off over there. And I'm sorry, unfortunately I had to take let go of the Autumn's End thing so I can focus 100% on Deicide.
Yeah. And by the way, I was going to tell you, I fucking love those Autumn's End albums. And
thank you.
One thing, having seen the live clips that circulated from that first show that you played in Florida, what I would have loved to have seen was you on backing vocals, because I really, really liked your voice on the Autumn's End records, especially the Siren's Lament. There was kind of a real guttural element to it, but very well enunciated, super aggressive. There's just like there's like a badassness to it. It's the best way to describe it, that I fucking loved, and that I think would juxtapose quite nicely to Glenn as well.
Well, thank you. We have the very first tour I did, first run of tours, back in 2019 with Deicide. I was doing a bunch of backing vocals, but as and openly, admittingly, that first year you're trying to get your sea legs. I'm trying to figure out where my existence is, who I am with this band, my personality, where I fit, and trying to get, and all I was doing was focusing on playing the songs. I wasn't really having much of a stage presence that I'm able to do now that we've been, that I live here, that we're in the band together. So I found that I wasn't doing it well enough. And I was actually kind of throwing some of the other guys off when I was doing some of the backing vocals and playing some of the complex parts. It wasn't quite right. Maybe we'll bring it back, maybe in a little bit of time, now that we're really, really well rehearsed and we're tighter than ever. Then maybe we will bring it back. And, you never know. You never know. But vocally, when it was right, it did sound very, very good together, all three of us. But I did make some, a couple of mess ups that I probably, said, oh, maybe I shouldn't have tried that one that time, and
yeah.
And in front of that many people, oops, good job, dickhead, so.
I have always been, and I will always be a fiend for, I think maybe because of the music I grew up with, so stuff like Exodus, bands where that kind of gang vocal thing was quite commonplace, especially live.
Right.
I'll just always be a fiend for that. I love it. For me, it creates like an element of organized chaos on stage, but it also sort of creates an element of unpredictability. Like you never know what's going to happen next. I remember seeing a clip of Biohazard doing a version of Hold My Own where they had Scott from Pantera as the third man on stage doing vocals, and it's just this interplay between Evan, Scott, and Billy, and it's just it's complete carnage on stage. But I love it, absolutely.
Yeah.
Love it. If anything gets me fired up, it's that kind of feeling on stage. And where I've seen Deicide personally, because I haven't seen them with you yet, but where I've seen Deicide best, that the show that I've enjoyed most, and I've probably seen the band about 5 or 6 times, was that when London Burns DVD where Dave Suzuki was on, and again. Partly because I also saw Glenn beforehand walking past with a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I was like, I know this is going to be a good one. So he came on stage in a great mood, chewing out the audience, doing his thing, and then you have Dave on stage, and there was like an intensity about it that I just I just love, absolutely love.
And you can't take anything away from the might and awesomeness of Dave Suzuki. The dude is just an incredible part of death metal history. Such a great player, and I'm and it's funny because when I'm doing some of the older songs, some of the older solos, some of the live footage of certain previous members weren't very good. So like learning some of these solos, I was like, what was that? So a lot of times I went to the Suzuki ones because he always pulled them off better than most. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to learn that specific solo the Dave Suzuki way and not the way that, this other person tried to do it. I'm like, oh, I ain't going to do that, And then after doing it that way for a while, then you just kind of incorporate your own style to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. And just like with the gang vocal thing, the bands that did it so great was obviously hardcore. When you see stuff like Sick of It All, Biohazard, Agnostic Front, and then when you get the multi-vocal thing going with a band like Neurosis, oh my God, that just crumbles me. It's so amazing.
Yeah. I knew Neurosis is incredible. I mean, for me, they're like, one of the elite of the elite bands.
Yep.
But for me as well, and I'm very open about this on, I've spoken about this on the show many, many times. I did an episode where I did a tribute to the record as well. But the first Deicide record to me, there has never been, and I don't think there ever will be, a greater death metal record produced ever. It's got an edge of nastiness to it that even 31 years or 32 years or however old it is now just doesn't go away. It just always sounds great. Songs like Mephistopheles and the track Deicide, like that Beth on Deicide where it kind of builds up to that break and Glenn is like, kill him. It's just sounds so fucking awesome, and it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. And live it sounds fucking cool too.
I have to agree. Like my personal favorite Deicide records is obviously the first album, Once Upon the Cross, Stench of Redemption, and Overtures of Blasphemy, the last album. Because I was hanging around, I was, visiting Florida a lot when they were putting that album together. So I was like a little personal connection. And I loved the way those songs were coming together. And but that first album, you can tell, is the thing that what makes it it's a first album. So that first album is that hunger. You're putting your every foot forward that you possibly can. You're throwing it all on the line, completely risk-free, and just doing everything you can. That's what makes that album great. It was just completely hungry and insane. So it's incredible.
And insane is right. I mean, Glenn's voice sounds fucking unhinged for most of the record, and gloriously so. Mm-hmm. But so how did the Deicide relationship start? And how did it come to be that you ended up joining the band?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a long story, but and I'll make it like the Cliff Notes version. When I first started working over at Dean, I've known the guys for everybody Deicide for quite a long time, since even when Ralph was in the band back in 2006. Ralph was a very good friend of mine, and when I started working over at Dean, Glenn reached out. It was like, "Hey man, I heard you're in Florida now." I'm like, "Well, I'm commuting." He's like, "Well, when are you in town next?" I told him when. He's like, "Come down to rehearsal, check some stuff out, chill out with us." I'm like, "Sweet, that'd be awesome." And I went down there, hung out, listened to them, playing some music. And I don't want to, step out of line by saying anything. I'm just going to make it easy to say. Easiest way to put it was like, I noticed there was some things that were a little off internally, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's weird," And I'm not going to talk shit or anything like that. That's not my place.
No,
but,
of course.
And so, one time we were sitting there talking after the rehearsal. We were eating dinner down the road, literally right around the corner. And I was like, made a joke about, well, when, if the situation falls apart, man, you got a guy right here. It's pretty good, And he was like, "Well, what do you know? Me and Steve were talking about this already. And, we want you to, but before we do anything and talk about it, you have to learn the Homage for Satan solo from Ralph. And it has to be on point before we'll even talk any further. As much as we love you as a friend, as much as our personalities work, you have to learn that." So I spent fucking like a week straight working on that solo. It was so hard to learn. It's so long. It's so ridiculous at times, but I finally got it. And then we started talking, and, it came down, and, I don't want to get into the minutia, but it just ended up working really fast. Like, wow, this is it. This is what's going to happen. And we knew it was going to happen. We kept it on the DL for quite a while. And then when it finally happened and we were able to announce it on Valentine's Day, 2019, going forward, I am the official member of the band. I'm not a fill-in or anything like that. Granted, it ruined Valentine's Day for my wife, but it was a great day for me.
Yeah, I was about to say, so your wife, is she into the same music that you're into? Is she
mostly yeah. We both have a similar love of on the heavier side. She really leans more towards the doom side, like the Saturnus and the Neurosis, the Cure, stuff like that. Where I go more death metal, she finds that a little bit too abrasive. Like, she doesn't really like death metal and black metal as much as she likes doom and gothic metal. But yeah, she's very supportive. My family's very supportive of it, and the kids think it's cool. Surprisingly enough, maybe it's because I was older when I had, my daughter Bella, but I'm just old enough to where I'm almost cool to her, like almost a cool dad. Like, I've seen her steal my shirts out of my closet. She'll wear them to school just to piss off her teachers. I'm like, that's my girl.
Oh, dude, Deicide used to be like the pariah of pariahs when I was growing up, because I'll never forget. I mean, I went to a school that was very, openly Christian, and, very, like, they took that shit super serious. I remember a guy brought a Legion CD to school, and the teacher got it and lost.
Hold on one second. Have a look. Sure. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Continue.
Cool. No worries. No, I was saying a guy that I knew brought a Legion CD to school, and a teacher got hold of it. And obviously the lyrics are in there, and there's Glenn looking at possibly his most evil, and he absolutely lost his fucking rag about that. I remember him showing it to every class, like, "Look at this. This is what the kids are listening to right now. In hell I burn for Satan, repent and die." And it went on and on and on. But anyways, yeah, my daughter doesn't mind my music. Some of it she quite likes. She's 7 years old now. My girlfriend not so much. I was listening to Stench of Redemption in the car the other day, and I think we got to like almost the end of the record, where she was like looking at me like, "This is a bit much." So
my wife will just, like, when it gets to that point, like about halfway through Stench of Redemption, she'll just, calmly look over and just smile. And then next thing I know, it's, Fascination Street, from The Cure instead. She just flips it right off. No, that's enough. I'm like, oh, okay. So I was always taught, if you want your marriage to work, you have two choices. You could be happy or you can be right. So.
Yeah, no, that is very, very true. Now, kind of the chemistry that you had with Glenn and Steve, just relaying my own experience with them. Steve in particular, I've met Glenn briefly once. He signed a copy of my Dechristianized record, and very nice guy. Steve I've met a couple of times, and I may have mentioned this on the podcast before, but he actually, when I had my 28th birthday, I went down to interview him straight from work, so I still had my suit on, and I didn't have the beard. I looked like a fucking asshole. Walked in, we spoke for about an hour, and then he's like, "Oh, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, it's my 28th birthday, so probably going to go home." Immediately called the PR lady over from the label, said to her, all of my other, cancel all my other interviews. I'm going to hang out with this dude, and we're going to drink beer tonight. So we literally sat there drinking beer until midnight, 1 o'clock. Oh. Absolutely made my day, and made my birthday. But he spoke to me about a couple of things that I always thought that always kind of stuck with me about the way he thinks about writing music, because I know he writes the majority of what Deicide does. And he kind of said, when I write, I'll purposefully think of, how is this going to go over live? Where's like a build up to where, the crowd is really going to get into it. Almost like that breakdown that we were talking about on Deicide, on the title track. And then he also said, and this was back when Ralph was still in the band, he said to me, I'll consciously write and sort of leave space for a musician for the guitarist to come in and put their signature on it. Which one I thought worked really well on Stench of Redemption, because I love Ralph's solos on there. But two, I was curious, how have you experienced him as a writer, as a musician? I mean, he's also one of my favorite drummers ever in death metal.
The best way I could put it is this way. Steve is literally one of the most talented musicians I've ever dealt with in my life. I mean, he's just a killer guitar player. Obviously, redefined drums, and is still known as one of the best drummers of all time, especially in death metal. And he's a great piano player. So he's a wonderful pianist. So working with him, it was like, I learned two things. Like when I first joined and we were learning this catalog, oh my gosh, learning all these songs, Steve is definitely like, I've always been lucky to be surrounded by great drummers. At least I've had quite a few in my life, like Joey and my old drummer, Jason Kowalski, who were bus drivers. And Steve is a bus driver. He is, musically, he controls the show, like the pace of everything, and he hears everything. So like my first, time jamming certain songs, he would stop and be like, listen, when I hit this cymbal right here, you should be on the A sharp. You weren't on the A sharp. You were still on the C. So I can hear it. So you need to be on A sharp when I hit this, follow me. And he hears all of this stuff very acutely. And dude's brilliant. And the way that him and Glenn work together, it's definitely it's a great, a relationship that you can tell has been successful for over 30 years. But like with writing with him, it's been amazing, because he's been the stuff that he's been bringing forward for the new record has been really cool, but we're all writing together now. So it's really neat, because Steve will get involved, but he definitely gives enough room to where we can, like with our own pieces that we're bringing forth to the table, he'll have an influence onto it, and what is thought of, arrangements of certain things, but still lets it be yours. But he makes sure it still sounds like Deicide, So he's so good to work with. And same with Kevin. Kevin is a very, very creative guitar player. He's not like the most crazy lead player you're ever going to see or anything like that, but he is so creative. Him and Steve have really gotten a really good bond of writing together as well. And like with Glenn, when he comes in with an idea, he gets very like, he has his ideas like pretty well set, and he knows how he wants it to feel, but he lets us still be us. So just like you said before, so Glenn is very much like Steve in that respect, to where it's like, this is my idea, this is what it has to come together, but still I want you to still sound like Chris, you still have to sound like Cannella, you still have to sound like Kevin,
Yeah.
Steve will, throw in some ideas, but yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's very creative. I didn't really realize I was going to be this much of a part of the band and writing process when I first joined, but it really has been a very, symbiotic relationship. It's been amazing.
Yeah. What I like about what you're saying as well, especially going back to, how you joined the band and the conversations that preempted that, it kind of sounds to me like, they brought you in because you're Chris Cannella, not because you're somebody that can sound like, one of the Hoffman brothers or Ralph Santola. They brought in Chris Cannella. They would like Chris Cannella's vibe and Chris Cannella's sound and your signature and what you bring to the table, your musical voice present in what they're doing, which I think is awesome.
Well, thank you. I'd like to think so. I like to, at least I like to think so. That's pretty cool, but at least it feels that way. Definitely, for sure.
Steve has said to you, "You're only as good as your last riff."
Exactly. Exactly. I'm only as good as that last show was. Fortunately, I ended up on a good note. So
yeah, man. So you guys just did that tour with Internal Bleeding, which by all accounts was fucking insane. What was the crowd response like to you guys on that first date? Because that was kind of really the floodgates opening and saying, death metal's back in business, or at least on stage.
It was insane. It was amazing. Walking up on that stage, we did that one small little pop-up show earlier in the year during we were just being really rebellious and wanted to kick some dust off and have a little fun at a place that was like the size of a couple of bathrooms, like really small. That was fun and a little nerve-wracking. This was very it was adrenalizing. It was just it was a high that I haven't felt in a long time. So coming back on the stage for that first show, and we opened the tour in Tampa, and it was outstanding. The crowd was great. We played really strong. It was a really good time. And it was overwhelming in how the crowds have been for the entire tour. I guess I would have, you think you'd expect it, with everybody being cooped up for so long. But we thought it was going to be a lot more scary out there. We thought people were going to be a lot more apprehensive and stuff about going to shows, the way that the media put stuff on TV. But the truth is no, the crowds were great every night. And, even like at a place where it would be a lot more rural, like a fill-in show that you're doing to get to another state, the crowd was still great. Even if it was a small one, they were always just awesome. And the excitement, the screaming and the passion of these fans who've been waiting so long for death metal to come back, or even live shows in general, and for us to be the first band to complete a full U.S. tour in our genre it was risky, but there was a certain bit of looking at each other at the last night going, man, we pulled this one off. This is awesome. And we can still do it. And we played really strong together. In my opinion, it was the best run of shows that I personally have ever played with the band.
And I'd always wondered what that response was going to be, once shows started back up again, because, I've mentioned this to you offline. My theory has always been, because fans don't have to pay for music anymore, they attach less value to it than they used to. So you don't see, as a result, that craziness that you used to see, on those Exodus shows in the 80s, where, you frankly, you went into the pit there and you knew you were in the pit afterwards.
Yes.
I always thought there's, one possibility post-pandemic was that because live music had been taken away from people, they kind of realized what they'd lost, and therefore attached a lot more value to it, and really kind of had a hunger for that, to be in that environment and to have that experience again. And I kind of thought, okay, based on that, maybe it'd be interesting to see what the crowd response is like. At least from the videos I saw, I mean, people seem to be going fucking apeshit.
There was a few points, and you nailed it right on the head. And I honestly will agree with everything you said 100% about the music being taken away from them for so long. And then once they get it, they're, I guess, overly, maybe they appreciate it more. Maybe, I don't know. But there was a few times where I was scared on stage. I was like, man, these kids are going crazy. And we had to start getting, some extra, security to keep an eye on things because they were insane. It looked like when I first, went to a Slayer at a Slayer show in 1987, it was violent like that. And a couple times, like one time in Dallas, I mean, some guy went so crazy on stage, the mic nailed Glenn right in the face and he saw stars for a second. He never missed a note. Never missed a vocal part. He finished up the rest of the song flawlessly, but it was like, wow, okay, this is getting wild again.
Yeah.
But you can't blame them. You're not mad at them for going crazy. They've been cooped up. They needed to get out, and they're excited and they're happy to have it back. So we were proud to, for our genre, we were proud to be the guys going out there first and taking the risk, And the guys in Cataclysm had a great tour. The guys in Internal Bleeding had a great tour. And then the opening band, Begat the Nephilim, first time I've ever seen them, first time I've really ever heard of them. And what a talented group of young guys that is. Wow. And their first tour being on that, they were like, or their first tour with us, they've done some smaller tours and stuff, but they really they had a good night every night. It was a great time. It was like, just unleashing the wolves.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I have a personal soft spot for Internal Bleeding. I think that last record that they did, Corrupting Influence, is just that's just made for violence. You hear that, and you can just imagine how that's gonna go down. If they're on stage performing that. And I really like that new single they released as well. But I wanted to ask you, how far down the track are you now as far as writing new Deicide material and getting ready to kind of record an album, or at least have the material ready to be able to do so down the line?
Without stepping out of line, I'm only at liberty to say so much. So basically what I can say is that the music side of everything looks like we're about ready to start tracking it. There's a lot of cool stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm definitely not at liberty to talk about at this point in time. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but it is some really exciting stuff going on with us. Musically, if we could technically start, recording very soon. I think we're still going to just fine tune a few more things in there in our own little pre-production world, but that's good. It's really killer. It's really close.
And I know people will wonder about this, so I'm going to have to ask. In terms of sound wise, is this just classic Deicide? Are there things that about this new material that listening to it as a fan that would surprise you? What's your kind of take on where the sound has gone?
I would say there is without going into too much detail and letting too many cats out of the bag with stuff, but definitely there's two things you're going to hear more than anything. I think if there is such a thing to be able to hear this, I think you're going to hear a lot of camaraderie. I think you're going to hear four guys that like to be in a band together. I think that's the first thing that you're going to pick up on. And the second thing is, there's obviously going to be great drumming. You're going to hear some crazy vocal stuff. Glenn's voice is stronger than it's been in a long time. And it is really good. And I'm really excited for people to hear that. And of course, my style of leads, I'm going to be bringing something different to the table. And I think you're going to hear it's very creative. There's a lot of thought going into these songs, and the parts are just really, there's nothing thrown together. There's no thrown together piece. Like every song, if we didn't like where it was going, we'd kill it and start over. Yeah. And, if it was a song that I was bringing forth and it wasn't working, kill it, let's start over, bring another one in, Chris, and let's work on something else, or whoever's, everybody says that, every band says that this album is going to be so awesome and they're so proud of it. For me, it's my first, album with the band. So I am definitely going to be proud of it. And I think people are going to hear some really cool stuff. They're always going to have those dudes that say the same old cliche BS, Deicide ain't the same since this period of time. You know what? That's the guy that's not buying a record. He ain't going to a show. He's the keyboard warrior that's sitting in his grandma's basement with a cape on and masturbating to Soap Opera Digest. because you can't even have porn in the house. It's those are the guys I don't worry about anything like that. There's going to be people that talk crap, and I always like to say, talk all the crap you want, because I'm the one that's lucky enough to be able to go out on stage with these guys.
Yeah. Well, they get the phrase "they hate you because they ain't you" comes to mind there. And I do think there's this contingent of negativity in particularly social media, metal Twitter as they call it. They're just it used to kind of rile me up. Nowadays I just look at them and I just go, you sad pathetic loser. There is so much that's coming out in the genre, especially black metal or death metal, that's exciting and interesting and new and pushing the boundaries and is worth getting fired up for. I mean, year after year, it becomes harder and harder for me, as an example, to pull together a top 20 favorite releases of the year, because there's so much cool stuff to choose from. I think right now is the most exciting time to be a fan of this music.
And you really hit something on the head too. Social media and a lot of metal digital magazines and stuff like that think that to get a negative reaction is the only reaction. That way more people read their publication.
Yeah.
And some of them, I'm not going to say all, because there's a lot of great ones out there, but there's a few out there that literally just try to bait people into saying negative stuff. And it's like, what are you getting out of that? That is not what metal was about, man. When we were kids and we were listening to metal, we were tape trading for a reason, because we wanted our bands to come to our town. We wanted bands to succeed. And we want other bands, even if you're in a band, like in the 90s when I got into my first real bands that were doing stuff, we wanted the whole scene to thrive. Because why? Then we have more people to tour with. You have more stuff to do. Everybody thrives. There's more people out there. The shows get bigger that way. There's more fans. And right now is a very exciting time in music. Like the new Rivers of Nil, very interesting new stuff that's coming out of those guys. There's so much good music coming out. Like that band Begat the Nephilim, they were so good. Internal Bleeding, the new Cataclysm. There's just, and I'm not just saying that because we're all on tour together. I enjoyed watching their sets. These were good bands. There's some good stuff going on. So I personally just, you said it right. This is an exciting time to be a fan of this music, because there is some good stuff. Now, there is also some stuff that, has been, in my opinion, very homogenized and very, we want to be like them, so we're going to sound exactly like them. People haven't learned the idea. Like when I give clinics, I tell everybody, first and foremost, write music that you want to hear. Don't write music just to fit in to something else. Write what you want to hear. If you're not hearing what you want to hear, whether it be on the radio or Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, then make it, create what you're not hearing. Take some risks, but because there is a lot of stuff and a lot of the kids. But I do, like I was going to say, I wouldn't say the kids. Let's say the 20 and 30-year-olds. Around the 30-year-old, they're the ones that were kind of, not all of them, but there's a lot of homogenization went there. But then I seen recently with very young kids. I was given a clinic thing a while ago over at a place called Full Compass up in I think it was Wisconsin or Minnesota, and I was walking around and there was this young kid. He was 15 years old, and he was playing the Sentinel from Judas Priest on his guitar. I looked over, I'm like, "Hey, that's the Sentinel. That's Judas Priest. That's like really old. How come you're not playing?" Bring Me the Horizon or Pierce the Veil. And he stopped me and he looks at me with this just loathing face. Like I was the biggest dork ever. And he looked at me and he's like, "Excuse me, these guys played amps," and turned away. And I was like, there's hope. There's hope. The young kids are loving it. And that's why it was so shocking to see so many young kids at the Deicide tour. Young fanatics that knew the lyrics. Knew so they were fans, and they're like asking me about amps. Like, "Oh man, that's a really great sounding tone, dude. What's with that guitar? It's so weird looking." Because because I have an ebony top, and it's just really strange looking, unique guitar. But people ask about it all the time, about tone and how I got it, and I was just like, wow, there's hope. There's a lot of hope. It's not going. So it's a good time to be a fan of metal music. It's a good time to be a fan of this new stuff that's coming out. Don't have to be homogenized. Take some risks. Have fun.
Yeah. No, I agree. And the thing is, there's also, a lot of the younger crowd. Like I remember seeing Obituary open for Slayer on the last leg of their final tour here in London, and the folks who were getting most into it, because I specifically looked, I was like, I wonder how this audience is going to respond to it, because I've seen Slayer many, many times. Most bands, not called Lamb of God, get a fucking hard time opening for Slayer, and the people that were getting into Obituary most were young kids. Right up front, headbanging, moshing. And it was fucking great to see, because, I thought to myself, man, if ever a band deserved this comeuppance, it's these guys.
Kids right now, I believe that they have been, and I hate to use the term kids like I'm some really old dude, but I kind of am. So it's like, there was, what they're asking for is they want something that's really genuine. They want the real deal back. They want authenticity. They want, I'm not a very eloquent person, but they, like I said, they want the real stuff back. They want to see real stuff. It's cooler for a young kid to wear an Iron Maiden t-shirt than it is for them to wear a, Billie Eilish. It's just cooler.
Yeah.
Even though Billie Eilish is one of the biggest performers in the world and a very talented girl, but it's just not as cool as wearing an Iron Maiden shirt, because that was the real deal. And when you hear kids talking to each other, or even talking to you, and they're asking, like, what's it like wheeling up those cabinets and setting up guitar cabinets, man? It's got to be fun, right? And like, at first you're thinking, man, this shit's heavy, but then you're like, but then you're like, wait a second, this is cool. These kids are excited about amplifiers and playing loud, and AC/DC. Kids like really like learning AC/DC songs, not just the power chords, but like the full chords and the melodies, the rawness, and just rock and roll and real metal. So seeing Obituary, our brothers of Tampa, and some of my best friends on the planet, horns up to Trevor, seeing those guys, and Terry, seeing those guys taking that Slayer tour was just like, man, we high-fived them like all day long. They're friends. You want to see your friends succeed.
Yeah. And I'll also say with Deicide, you guys have been better than many at giving young bands the rub as well, and taking younger bands on tour, getting younger bands exposure. I do think some of the old guard, not necessarily as much as in extreme music, but especially in thrash, I think that's one thing that if I had to point a finger, I'd go, there are a lot of bands that frankly, you guys should be having with you. I believe strongly there needs to be a Metallica Testament tour, because more people need to know how great Testament is.
Right.
But again, I've always appreciated the fact that Deicide's always been a band that has tended to take newer bands, underground bands, grim bands, my kind of shit, out on tour with you, because again, high tide raises all ships. So if you guys do well, if the scene does well, everyone benefits.
I think, I don't have really like a lot to add to that, except for, Deicide has always been good about taking on, younger bands, as well as some bands like, that maybe needed a little kick in their career again, that haven't been around for a while, that are coming back, like Jungle Rot or Internal Bleeding, and the ones that we did in the States. And then, with like bands like Begat the Nephilim, or like when we had The Absence out in 2019, and then Origin, I think it's really, they get together. The thing that's cool is like Glenn and Steve will get together with the agent, and they'll really sit down and like, there's all these bands that we can take out. Let's find out what's going to be the best for everybody. Let's give these guys some fun. Let's give these guys, take them out on a real tour and get them exposed if they're good and they're willing to do it. And they really think about it a lot. So it's really cool.
Awesome. All right, my brother, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time. I had an absolute blast talking with you. One final question. Right behind you is one of my all-time guitar heroes, all-time musical heroes. And I know you've dealt with many people over the course of your career. Dimebag, any dealings with him? Any sort of?
I actually dealt more with Vinny. I really didn't have many dealings with Dimebag, except for back in Arizona, when Sepultura was still the lineup that we know of, with Max and Igor, they were all living in Phoenix. So they would have like Andreas's house, he'd live with Goody, or no, Paula lived with Goody. So like they would have these crazy parties all the time. And, there was, and Dime was there at a few of them. I didn't really hang out with him very much, but he was always very jolly, very happy. The times that I saw him there, and he loved to play craps and dice and stuff like that. So, my buddy sat down with him. We sat down like, hey man, you got $20? Yeah, sure. Put down $20. And like 8 seconds later, I'm out $20, and I'm not sure what happened, but I was like, okay. And that's about it. I really didn't have much time. Vinny, great human being, super nice guy.
Also phenomenal drummer.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a guy who's just a solid, phenomenal drummer, and creative. He made, drum melodies that you remember, I always said to Steve, one thing that makes me laugh about Steve, and I'll say it about Vin too. The great drummers are the ones that you see people air drum the weird hooks to. So like when you see people air drumming to Once Upon the Cross, you always see him, or When Satan Rules His World, you always see people copy Steve on the China hit, or like with Vinnie Paul, when he does that, the triplets with his feet, you always see people copying that, the hook, that melody hook of drumming, or like Neil Peart, the simple, drum fills, everybody copies it and air drums it. That's when you know that you've done something good as a drummer, when you're air drummed to by anybody who doesn't play drums.
Yeah. For me, it's always, when it comes to drummers, especially, and guitarists, frankly, it's like, if I can close my eyes and somebody just plays me, bare track of a, drum line, and I can tell you straight away that's Steve, or that's Vinny, or that's Gene Hoglan, or, I'm just thinking of some of my favorite drummers. That's how it's a phenomenal drummer. And Steve has got this thing where I think is personally very unsung, and that is the Steve groove, which is kind of like, this rolling gallop, but it's like it's chasing the riff. Songs where he uses that, Christ Denied being one, on the song Deicide, he uses it on, I'm trying to think where else. He kind of uses it a little bit on When Satan Rules His World. It just, as soon as you hear it,
Children of the Underworld, he does it very well.
Yeah. Oh yes, perfect song. So that's the Steve groove. And as I said, I don't think it gets celebrated enough.
No, and that snare hand of his is so loud. I mean, his blast is so loud. He doesn't trigger his snares.
Yeah.
We mic and trigger the kicks just for the sake of consistencies, but really he's acoustically a very loud player. So live, I don't even use a wedge anymore. I just have my wedge turned off. I literally don't even have anything coming up. I just hear my guitar. Glenn's really loud in his wedges, and I just listen to Steve over there. He's so loud. He's such a solid dude. That's great.
Cool. All right, dude.
Cool, man.
I'm going to let you go. Just hang fire for 2 seconds. I'll hit stop on the recording. I want to say something to you offline, but for the sake of completion, goodbye.
Thank you, man. Take it easy.
That was Behind the Light Thou Shall Rise off the classic Once Upon the Cross, the third record by Deicide. Frankly, if you don't know the song and you don't know the album, you are a disgrace and you should be ashamed of yourself. One of the first Deicide records that I ever heard, and I think I was about probably 14 or 15 years old. It scared the fucking bejesus out of me, and I have loved it ever since. But thank you very much to Chris for coming on the show. Great talking to him, and hopefully I'll get to do so again at some point in the future. But awesome that he gave me his time, and I hope you guys enjoyed that chat. On now to some new music, and I want to talk about Pestilential Shadows. The album is Revenant, and since I spoke about Australian metal with Chris, it felt to me that it was only fitting that I should talk to you about a really rock-solid release from a band from the land down under. So Revenant is the sixth album by Pestilential Shadows. To be specific, if you are living in Australia and you want to go stalk their homes, they hail from New South Wales, and they've been active since 2003. They were originally lumped into the suicidal black metal scene for a period of time, very inaccurately in my opinion, and also because I think the suicidal black metal scene is for fucking idiots and posers and wimps. But frankly speaking, if any doubt existed as to their stock in trade, then Revenant, in my opinion, is likely to settle that debate once and for all. So should you head to Bandcamp and pick this record up, you'll be gifted with 6 tracks that are pretty lengthy, really engaging, super entertaining, rooted in second wave black metal tropes, but filtered through that Australian prism that I spoke to Chris about, where everything just sounds a little bit off axis, but in kind of the best possible way. For me, that manifests really concisely in the on particularly the title track, which also serves to kind of sum up what Pestilential Shadows are about. Huge fuck-off riffs, the aggressive and tortured vocals of Balam, their frontman, who's particularly his use of howls and kind of stuff that, it sits outside the traditional black metal scream, I think owes a debt of inspiration to the great Attila out of Mayhem. But more than that, though, that track, like everything else on the album, really does feel like a journey that the band orchestrate masterfully along multiple tempos, a really thick, enveloping atmosphere, and these kind of bursts of just pure nastiness and menace and hate. 2 additional things I love about this album that I should mention too. I think the cover art is absolutely stunning. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see it in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. But even more importantly, the sequencing of the album, which is something that I've spoken about on the podcast previously and is very important to me, I think is done to absolute perfection. So if you're going to listen to this, make sure it's a start-to-finish exercise. It's not an album that you kind of, flap on one song and then move on to the next thing. This is something that merits your attention for at least I think it's about 45 minutes long. And as you can guess anyways, I'm a fan of the album. I highly recommend you check it out. It's available right now on Seance Records, and I'm going to lay the title track on you right now. This is Revenant by Pestilential Shadows. Revenant by Pestilential Shadows, the sixth album by this band, and frankly, in my opinion, one of their very best, and also one of the very, very best records I think that's come out for at least the last month or two. So make sure that you check it out. Like I said, it's available on Seance Records. It is a fine step up from some of the more prolific stuff that came out over the weekend. The big one, of course, being the new Rivers of Nile record, The Work. If you listen to that crap and you say to me that, I think this new Rivers of Nile is really great, but I don't like Deftones because they're new metal, and I don't like Queens of the Stone Age because they're not heavy enough, then you can fuck right off. It is such a load of shit. I mean, there's one or two moments that are okay, but between the fucking endless saxophone and the just formulaic, annoying way in which the whole album is put together, like you got these incredibly mellow, like almost poppy parts, in my opinion, that then give way to, like, it's almost like halfway through the song the band went, oh shit, we're actually supposed to be a heavy band, so down, let's get the distortion on, down tune the guitars, fellas, and let's do just like one bit of chugging and I'll scream over it. Lame. No place on a show like Into the Necrosphere. But Pestilential Shadows, like I said, that definitely deserves your attention. And as you can see, I'm seriously in the mood to talk some shit. So let's head over to Metal Storm and see what they have to say for themselves. So as we head over to Metal Storm, I am greeted with a out of picture, but a bold but evocative line, unable to connect to the database, and a poignant black screen. Which means that through the magic of green screening, the blue wall goes back up, and I get to talk to you guys about specifically the records that I'm looking forward to for the rest of the year, because I actually made a list based on what I had some of the headlines I'd been reading on Metal Storm over the last week, and just checking out various songs. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 albums that I'm pretty excited about between now and the end of the year. The first one being the forthcoming record by Goat Torment. They are going to be putting out a record on Season of Mist. If anyone has heard their stuff, it's pretty back to basics, kind of thrashy black metal. But the Season of Mist have put out 2 tracks so far, and I think it's really, really cool. I've spoken with Katie about getting them on the show as well, so looking forward to that. I think the initial thing that attracted me to them was they spoke about their new music or whatever as just being straightforward, no nonsense, I think devil worshipping black metal, which immediately appealed to me. So Goat Torment, I think the album is called Forked Tongues. Really looking forward to that. 2 Debemer Morty releases, Doodsvanger, I've already spoken about them. And then a band that I heard a track of this week called Light of the Morning Star. Debemer Morty always seems to, particularly towards the end of the year, and I'm just going to look up what the Light of the Morning Star record is called, but yeah, particularly towards the end of the year, they always seem to come in really, really strong. And last year, I think my top 5 was all Debemer Morty releases, barring one, which was Utkana. Light of the Morning Star from the United Kingdom, and the new record that they're putting out is called Carnal Noir. What I have heard of it so far, I've really, really liked. So looking forward to that. Then the new Churchburn record. I've heard a couple of snippets off of that. I really liked the EPs that they put out previously. Churchburn are a blackened sludge band, heavy as fucking all get out. The record is going to be called Genocidal Rite. I think it comes out in October or November. But again, what I've heard of it so far, I thought was absolutely top notch. Their previous stuff. So they've got a record out called The Awaiting Coffins. I've not listened to that yet. I did listen to None Shall Live, The Hymns of Misery, which I really enjoyed too. And then, of course, Lockup is putting out a new record too. I think it's called The Dregs of Hades. I am a fucking huge Lockup fan. I'm also a huge Shane Embry fan. Really, really excited about this. By the way, I'll let the cat out of the bag here. The one of the whales that I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks is actually Shane Embury. So, if you watch the podcast, you know how excited I am about talking to him. And for various reasons, every single time we've had something in the diary, something has either come up on my side or something's come up on his side. I actually dragged my fucking sorry ass to my desk and my setup over here when I had COVID. Then he had something urgent come up, and as I said, back and forth we've gone. But it looks like I might be able to record that at some point in October. So that is hopefully definitely going to happen. He'll definitely be on the show. I'm very excited about that. And Lockup is, in my opinion, one of the best bands that he does. I also really like the fact that on the new Lockup stuff, or at least the first track they've released, they have both Thomas and Kevin doing vocals. Thomas Lindbergh, obviously, of At the Gates, Kevin Sharp, formerly of Brutal Truth. He's also in a Venomous Concept. I love that dual vocal thing, as you probably have picked up over the course of the last 2 years. So I'm very excited about that. The next record I'm also pretty interested to hear in its totality is 1914 out of the Ukraine. They are putting out an album called Where Fear and Weapons Meet. I really liked the last one they did, The Blind, Leading the Blind. If you don't know them, they're like a World War One inspired black metal band. But so far, the song I've heard of Where Fear and Weapons Meet, I think is excellent. They've included some symphonic elements to their sound, which I think is I'm always a little dubious of that. I'm not the biggest fan of kind of symphonic stuff, but with them, I think it works really, really well. So hopefully they can pull it off across 10, 11 songs, or however long the new record is. Again, what I've heard so far, I've liked. And then the final one that I'm very excited about, The Devil's Sermon, another band out of out of the UK, although I believe all the membership are Polish. They're based out of London. The record, I am not going to bother trying to pronounce the name. Actually, no. Let me do it, but I know I'm butchering it. Charna Jazen. Anyways, again, I've heard one track off of it so far. What I've heard, I've really, really liked. It's kind of primitive, raw, fucking nasty black metal. Absolutely up my street. So seriously looking forward to that. And then right now, and I'm not going to go through the names, obviously, but I tend to, from about September, I start refining my end of year list, because I do take that sort of shit seriously, and I want to make sure that when the time comes and I do my best of 2021 episode, that it's something you all look forward to, and you kind of get something out of it. So far, I have narrowed down the list to 24 potential contenders, excluding all of these bands that I've just mentioned now. So so there's a fair bit of there's still a fair bit of stuff to come, but it's been a good year for music. That's for goddamn sure. I'm still not certain who I'm going to do my best of 2021 episodes with. I'll do it in 2 parts again, like I did last year. I think I'll definitely want to ask Kelly if she's interested in doing one, and then maybe Mike from Tombs, because it'll be fun to have him on again. And he's he has a different kind of, he likes a lot of similar stuff to me, but he also likes a lot of different stuff. So he might have some good stuff to add to that as well. Next up, I did mention that I wanted to talk about the new Candyman, and I'll kind of briefly talk about it, because this is not a movie review show. But I was so fucking incensed by having to waste an hour and a half of my time watching that horse shit that I thought I would do this as a public service announcement, warning all of you that if you liked the first Candyman, then don't bother watching the new one. Just if you have a hankering to watch anything to do with Candyman, then go back and rewatch the first one. Because this new movie is the biggest fucking train wreck pile of shit that I have seen in a very, very long time. I think the only 2 things of any kind of, actually 3 things that I think are positives. Firstly, I think Yahya Abdul-Mateen, the main actor, I think he does an admirable job of chewing through a script that really feels to me like the failed fucking film school project of an idiot. I mean, you can almost tell at points that he's kind of not sure why he's saying the things that he's saying, but he's going to go full bore with with maximum dedication. And again, a shame, because he's a great actor, and he would have been a perfect kind of leading man for a movie like this. But be that as it may, the other thing that I like about the movie, I think the score is pretty good, even if it's not as maybe as evocative as I would have liked for a film like this, but it's not bad. And then the cinematography is pretty good. Literally, that's it. Everything else is absolute shit. Nia DaCosta, the director, I'm not sure what her horror movie credentials are, but somehow, somewhere, somebody clearly told her that she'd be great at directing horror. She has the unique ability to drain the suspense out of literally every single scene in a film. So where the first Candyman movie is, a pretty intense experience, and especially for that time, it was shocking, it was scary, it was, it was very, very suspenseful. This is the exact opposite. And not only is it the exact opposite, but as the movie progresses, between the fucking atrocious editing, that essentially means that the character arcs in the movie are, rather than kind of being a smooth gradation for the main character, as an example, down into madness, you basically have him being a sweet, lovable artist, tortured artist, obsessive with Candyman, and then, complete insanity. And it's just, there's nothing setting it up, there's no proper preamble, there's no emotional weight to any of the characters. Increasingly, the impression that I got from this fucking steaming turd was that this is a vehicle for Nia's and potentially the rest of the producers' personal politics, which they shoehorn into the movie in such a ham-fisted way that they may as well have just stopped the film had Nia walked on and gone, listen, we're just pausing everything here so that I can let you know that I believe X, Y, Z. It is a great example of why I have said in the past I've gotten to a point where I'm just gonna stick to watching old movies, because everything new that comes out just seems to be a letdown, a disappointment, or in this case, utter trash. I dread to think of what they're going to do to the Exorcist remake. Well, actually, I don't believe it's a remake anymore. I believe it's the same as Candyman, where it's like they're just continuing on from the first movie. I mean, firstly, ignoring Legion or Exorcist 3 as as most of the people know, most of the public call it, would be a fucking disgrace, and in my opinion, punishable with public flogging. But I don't know what they're going to do to it. I fear the worst. It'll be much like Predator. I think the only time they've actually managed to pull that off is Halloween, and again, that's because Halloween at least comes in with very little by way of an agenda. It's just an entertaining movie, and that's that. But forget fucking Candyman, everyone. It is a total pile of shit. And I mean, there's, aside from the things that I've mentioned, I don't really believe that it has any truly vindicating things to it. It's just a complete and utter disaster. And Nia, much like the rest of her woke brethren in Hollywood, you definitely get the impression as the film goes on that she's patting herself on the shoulder and going, man, I'm making something really profound here. Much like Kevin Smith with the latest He-Man. The only good thing about He-Man, and I watched the new He-Man with my daughter for the first episode and 0.2% of the next episode, and I put it off. I was like, this is fucking nonsense. We'll watch old He-Man if we want to watch He-Man. But the only good thing that came from it, and if you haven't seen it yet, make sure you watch it. Kyle Dunnigan, who's one of the best comedians on the face of the earth as far as I'm concerned, and he's currently got the funniest YouTube channel on the planet. He does a thing where he pretends to be Rocky, and he does a Rocky pick-me-up for Kevin Smith. Absolute genius. But yeah, that's it. The rest of E-Man is just complete and utter fucking twaddle. That feels to me like it's a perfect segue into Blabbermouth, and hang fire for 10 seconds while I zoom myself down. There we go, so you guys can see the headlines. The first one: former Exodus frontman Rob Dukes drops new generation kill song Into the Black. Didn't like the song. I like Rob Dukes, but the song is boring as fuck. Ex-Megadeth guitarist Chris Poland says he doesn't miss playing with a band. Of course not, because can you imagine being on tour with Dave Mustaine? Every single morning at breakfast, Dave goes, hey Chris, have I told you about the time that I nearly killed James Hetfield? But the teachings of my sensei stopped me from using my Jitkindo. So yeah, no, can't say as I blame him. Guns N' Roses to release Hard School 4-song EP in February. By the way, not 4-song, a little bit deceptive, because I think it's got live versions of Don't Cry, an atrocious Guns N' Roses song, and I think You Could Be Mine. But it'll have Absurd, that previous single that they released. That previous single sounds, in terms of quality, like Pretty Tied Up or Back Off Bitch or any of the finest Guns N' Roses ever released, in comparison to this new absolute train wreck. And it falls right in with my theory that unless you get Izzy Stradlin back in the band and you get every one of the guys in Guns N' Roses addicted to heroin and you shove them into a room and say, we're taking away all of your money, all of your luxuries, all of your personal assistants and your security guards and the hooers in the case of Axl, they're never going to release anything that's worth listening to. This song is potentially one of the worst of the year, and that is saying something. Exodus Tom Hunting opens up about his cancer battle. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. Fuck, I would hope not, bud. But again, like I said last week, very glad to see Tom is feeling better. He's a great guy. Also, obviously, I was relieved after seeing this traumatic photo of Corey Taylor. And again, if you're not listening to this on, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you will probably be able to visualize in your mind's eye the photo I'm talking about. Corey Taylor somehow managed to find a phone from 2007, take this grainy, shitty, up his nostrils photo of him with COVID to demonstrate how truly ill he was. Even though, by the way, he supposedly has the vaccine and he's telling everybody else to get vaccinated. And it's kind of this crazy fucking CNN logic where it's... I read a headline this morning, actually, before I started recording this, which ties into this nonsense, which is why I wanted to bring it up. It's something along the lines of... blah, blah, some woman believed in the vaccine, but the unvaccinated did not, and it cost her life. So the unvaccinated can somehow survive through the terrible catastrophe, but the woman who's got the vaccine that's supposed to save her life and preventing her from getting the illness, that their lack of vaccination cost her life. I mean, it's fucking moronic. But Corey Taylor is also a moron. And again, I was fucking at death's door when I had COVID, and I don't want to keep talking about it. But at the very least, I didn't take photos. I never even... The idea of taking a photo where I look like a complete jackass like he does here never crossed my mind. Anyways, let's going on. Rob Halford is just not interested in hearing Tim Ripper Owens era Judas Priest albums, which I think is a little pissy. Quite frankly, Rob Halford. I think Demolition and Jugulator have their moments, for sure. Rammstein guitarist Emigrate Project announces the Persistence of Memory album. Not excited about that at all. Ministry's US tour moved to March, April 2022 due to COVID-19 concerns. A little sidebar here. Where are the T-shirts where Biden is sucking down on a double-barrel shotgun? Where are the late-night comedians calling Hunter Biden a feckless cunt the way they did Ivanka, or at the very least calling him a racist scumbag, which is what he is? Again, I've spoken about this on the show. This, to me, isn't a left or right thing. This is a principle thing. If you have principles, then surely the same principles that the likes of Dee Snider, Sebastian Bach, Corey Taylor... all of these luminary professors of geopolitics and economics used to judge the Trump administration, surely we should have heard from them by now about the absolute catastrophe at the southern border, the economic mismanaging in America domestically, the fucking train wreck in Afghanistan, and yet we've heard nothing. I find that very interesting, and for me, that is why I get irritated with the very idea that As soon as a musician or a celebrity parrots some sort of nonsense that somebody saw on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News that somebody agrees with, then all of a sudden that person is switched on. They know what they're talking about. Al Jorgensen for years has been, thought of as, really switched on because he spoke out against the war. I didn't agree with the war either, but, again, I don't see Al speaking out against a bunch of the other dumb shit that, has happened under the Biden administration, or frankly, that happened under the Obama administration. He's mute on that. And again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll say this about Al. I'm a big fan of Ministry's music. I think creatively, Al is a genius. But are you going to look at him as he presents himself there and go, you know what, I think Al really knows how the world works. I'm going to hand over my 401k and I'm going to have him manage it. Or, I'm going to ask Al to give me some investment advice because, he really seems to know what time it is. But yeah, I mean, I do believe that the tide is turning. There's no doubt about that, and that's why I feel more and more positive about life now than I think I felt certainly last year or the year before. You can start to see people like Bill Maher, Russell Brand, people that were of the left before are starting to get clued into what's going on. Tulsi Gabbard is coming out, and she's somebody who I think really kind of operates on principle, even though I don't always agree with everything that she says. I mean, at least she stands by her principles. But all of these fucking charlatans and these grifters and these musicians that say, I'm allowed to have an opinion about politics. Of course you are, but I'm also allowed to tell you you're full of shit, and you are. And the fact that we don't hear from Tom Morello on a daily basis, or we don't hear from Paul Stanley on a daily basis anymore since the last election, it suggests to me that you didn't know what you were talking about. You weren't massively clued in about politics. You watched a little bit of CNN over the weekend, and then you decided that, hey, by the way, the rest of the entertainment industry is going this way, so I should step up and I should really talk about this too. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of folks offline in the music industry who actually do know what time it is, and with the exception of people like Alan Averill, most of them don't really talk out about it. And I think that I agree with what they're doing. I wouldn't talk about it, or I wouldn't speak out too much against the pervasive narrative in my industry either, because it's like pissing straight into a fucking gale force wind. It doesn't benefit you, and we're at a point in life, I think, or in society, where most of the people that eat up all the nonsense that comes out of Al's mouth or Corey's mouth or Dee's mouth, they're not interested in having a debate. They're not interested in. There's no amount of facts or evidence that's going to convince them otherwise. They believe what they believe, and that's it. And I feel like in some ways the only way to peacefully coexist with those people is just to go, I'll try and find something that we have in common if I'm forced to speak to you. Otherwise, let's just live our lives separately and best stay out of each other's way. But anyway, that's like just a little sidebar and a side rant, but I thought I'd mention it because I do, as I said, I do find it funny. I mean, there was a story recently about the supposed drone strike on the ISIS-K leader in Afghanistan. The story then came out, and by the way, when it happened, they were crowing about their over the horizon military capability. Then it comes out a couple of days later that, oh, by the way, we mistargeted and we killed a translator who worked with the U.S. military. But not only did we kill him, we killed all of his family, including several children. We're sorry about that. But let's move on, because we need to think about the terrible strike against our country on January the 6th, the insurrection, when we nearly lost our democracy because somehow a hundred or a couple of 100,000, a couple of hundred drunk idiots were going to take over the government and they would rule from the capital. It's like a fucking video game where if you lose your base, everything else is lost. And then, by the way, sidebar to that, the New York Times, the failing New York Times, they reported over the last couple of days that there are alarming connections between what happened on January 6th and the FBI. What a shock! Loads of people have been talking about that, and then they get palmed off as conspiracy theorists. And I'll tell you something right now, given the New York Times' stance on that whole fucking sordid mess, there is no fucking way that they are putting out an article where they're talking about, or where they are negatively speaking about the FBI, unless there's some fucking serious revelations coming. And you know what? there can be video footage of it happening. There can literally be a video of Biden and the FBI sitting around a table and Biden going, I think what would be a great idea is, get a couple of people, the thing, get them to storm the Capitol, storm it, just like my auntie stormed that cocaine. But people can see that. They're not going to give a fuck because they believe what they believe. They're so brainwashed and so out of it. It's again, I spoke with Alan about this on episode 85. It's not a case of people forgot their principles. They never had any fucking principles to begin with. They go with whatever the news tells them. They never assess any of the information objectively. They never assess any of the facts objectively. And they don't have any kind of moral compass to compare it to because they believe what they're told to believe. Anyway, side rant over. Let's see what else there is on here. As I Lay Crying release new song, Roots Below, which sounds, firstly, Roots Below, I think, is how Tim used to think of the cellmate that slept beneath him on the lower bunk. He's got his roots below. The song is an absolute load of fucking nonsense. Typical As I Lay Crying. A little bit of Iron Maiden put to somewhat down-tuned guitar, screaming angrily, but then the beast is tamed with some real, with some real soft singing, about how taking steroids increased my estrogen levels, and now I know what it feels like to be a woman. So absolute fucking crap. I've spoken about Guns N' Roses and this hard school debacle. Slipknot's Corey Taylor opens up about Joey Jordison's death. It's a damn tragedy. It's a damn tragedy that you fucking treated the guy like an absolute piece of shit when he was still around, bud. No use in crying about that now. Whitechapel shares music video for new song, A Blood-Soaked Symphony. Utter nonsense. I have grown to intensely dislike bands that sound like Whitechapel, and that song is definitely not changing my opinion whatsoever. I think final thing that I'll talk about, Behemoth's Nergal releases Me and That Man's music video for Angel of Light featuring Merkur. I didn't like the first Me and That Man record, but this song is actually pretty darn good. Kind of feels to me like old wannabe cowboy Adam Nergal Darsky is finding his feet in this project, and he's assembled quite the list of guests for this one. Black Hearse Cadillac, the first track, features Hank Von Hell. Under the Spell features Mary Gore. All Hope Is Gone features Blaze Bayley, Gary Holt, and Jeff Mantis Dunn. Elsewhere on the record, he's got David Vincent, he of Morbid Angel, and fucking ignoring me when I was lining him up to be on the show fame. And then Randy Blythe, Devin Townsend, Merkur, obviously I mentioned. So, it seems like this is going to be a pretty interesting record, or has the potential, at the very least, to be an interesting record. Like I said, the first one, to me, it sounded like Nergal had spent way too much time listening to King Dude, and he kind of wanted to do a Nergal version of that, which ended up just sounding like a Xerox, or Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox times 50 of King Dude's music. But anyways, on that note, folks, the news for this week is done. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you very much to everybody who stuck around to the very end. I really appreciate everybody's support, and I want to reiterate again, I don't do this podcast because I want to make money. I don't make a red cent off of this, and frankly, over the course of 98 episodes, it's been a bit of a scramble at times to get an episode pulled together, especially with the demands of my day job. But I do it because I think, firstly, because I love the scene. Secondly, because I think that I have assembled the coolest audience that I could ever have wished for, vastly surpassing my expectations when I first started this podcast. Again, I really hope you all know how much I appreciate and how grateful I am for all of the support, the reviews, the messages, everything that I get from all of you. Even if sometimes I don't respond back straight away, it's usually just because I'm tied up and busy, but I feel it right here in the cockles of my heart. I'll be back again next week, guest to be confirmed. I think I'm going to keep these guests as a surprise from now on. By the way, Kelly Schaefer of Atheist, you guys love yourself a bit of him. The most successful episode I've ever had. I don't know if in the long run it'll top Alex of Ruins of Beverast, but that kind of had a, 2-year head start on it, or at least a year and a half head start on it. So, who knows what'll happen? But first week numbers, I think over 3,000 views on YouTube, which just blew my mind. So again, thank you very much for that. I'm going to play out with a track that comes to us courtesy of a band that I think never quite got their fair shake. Autumn's End, featuring today's guest, Chris Cannella. This comes off of their swan song EP that came out in September 2017. The title track off of that record, Burn the Earth. And I will see all of you bad motherfuckers again next week.